it'll show up that way. You can add little bullet points. Right, so you can start to, play around, but you can do that for any of them. So there's this little HTML editor, and you can also have formatted stuff. So it's the whole, as far as I can tell, it's pretty much the whole thing. That's the basic Dublin core. Then, oh, and by the way, up here you have these little checkboxes, public and featured. Until you check the public box, it will not show up on your public-facing website. So you can leave. The default is that things are private until you make them public. So when you're ready, click the link. Featured is for that featured items thing. So you may have cataloged a lot of things, but honestly, some of them may not be pretty enough to want to have cycle through on the home page, so you can decide what is featured and what is not. So you can add, sorry, yes, you can also just, yeah.
So that public button, do you need to, if you've done a bunch of work, do you then need to go back into each item and make it public one by one, or can you do that as a batch?
I'll show, you can batch it, but in a different screen.
Okay.
So you can you say you're done, you can add the item now, or you can keep going, because our story gets better. That is the basic Dublin core, and then you have item type metadata, which is got a huge line right through it. So do something with the screen. Here we go. All right, document, moving image, oral history, sound, still image, event, email, lesson plan, hyperlink. So let's say, not that you'd be interested, sound. Do you have a transcription? What's the original format? Here it is assuming that you're uploading, this is where we get to the question of, are you cataloging the original object or are you cataloging the digital surrogate? For sound, it assumes that you're probably cataloging a digital surrogate, although you can say, no, this is a born digital recording, right? But this is a digital, I digitized this LP in here. Duration, and bit rate and frequency. So you can add all those in. You can assign it to a collection. We don't have any collections right now, but you make them here. I won't click off because I can't keep track. Now you have files. You can choose a file, and it just opens up like that. And then you can add files. And there is a plugin that I hadn't enabled yet, but you should, which is the Dropbox plugin, which allows you to upload bigger files than you can upload without it. Although remember, if you're trying to stay on the free account, you might want to initially not use the Dropbox plugin because it will warn you if your files are too big, which is an easy way to know whether or not you're about to hit your limit. And then you can add tags, and it tells you separate them with a comma, because that's a comma. Comma. Because we told it comma. And if I told it pound sign, it would say pound sign.
And the tags do autocomplete.
Yes.
I mean, this is focusing-on tagging, and be only as rigorous as you can enforce. But at least it will do the completion. So if you've got something in there, it'll complete, and then you stand a chance of having it be spelled the same way.
So now we're going to add this item, which doesn't have anything associated with it. But you now see your item, and you can also, I've got something else enabled from Brown, so it wants that you can find it at Brown. Good luck. But it's got, creator, if I put it in, whether it's not public, it's not featured, date added, right? So these are the items. And then if I click something, I can edit the item, and I can also add an item from this screen. So you can just kind of keep on keeping on.
Do they have a place where they tell you what kind of files, like particularly with audio files, like what parameters you're allowed to?
I haven't seen that, and I probably should have checked. But It typically, on my browser, so in a Mac, running Chrome, Safari, or Firefox, which are the things I use, it tends to open your audio and video files as QuickTime. It uses the QuickTime plugin, so that may be some things. I think it takes most,
It'll
does it
take
say?
MP3, it'll take MIDI, it'll take, I don't know, there's a list.
How do you
If
find the
go
list?
to omeka.net, help, the list on the right has accepted items. And then there's a list of extensions.
Takes a lot. Takes stuff. It'll take MP3, MP4, MP2, MOV, MIDI, yeah, so.
What this says it'll accept them, it doesn't say it'll play them though. Presumably it has players for them. But
Yeah.
some of it's gonna be browser based, I think, so you have that.
Yeah, so you may want to test it on both a Mac and a PC and in a couple different browsers, just to make sure, but they'll take most things. How they play back and when they play back, you probably want to just check for yourself. But no, really good question. And also you may have noticed that the help, right, you know, how to manage collections, manage tags, there's tons and tons of stuff, how to do all of that. So collections, you can add a collection. List collectors. And is this a public collection or not a public collection? So you can actually set the permissions. You can do a global set on a whole collection if you want. And then we've been item types, we've been tags. The CSV import. Over here, you choose your file. You select the item type, you select the collection. Do you want to make them public? Do you want to feature them? You choose the column delimiter. So in fact, even though it says CSV import, you can change the column delimiter. So if your CSV file is actually a tab separated file, or a pipe separated file, or a semicolon separated file, it'll handle that too. And it does want everything to be of, I think, the same kind, though, because it's going to set it's going to choose the specific metadata fields based on that. So if you may have to do a couple exports. So you may want to get, you know, all your images and then all your sound files and then all your. But you can also, I've never actually done this, but so I don't know how it works for composites folders, composite item types, because you notice there was an oral history up there, and an oral history will take a recording and a transcript and a couple of other things and bundle them together. But you may have some issues using the CSV.
I have a feeling that
With
the
that.
transcript in the oral history is actually in the field.
Yeah. So like I said, you might not be able to bulk load your oral histories. But you have them as a ontological unit, which is nice. So then we have exhibits. And since I don't have a ton of items in here, but I can show you how to do it. So hopefully this, you may have noticed, we have none. Like one. So, exhibits have metadata. Oh, also, by the way, a clear way to know that you don't have the exhibits plugin enabled is that you won't have this tab. Also, an easy way to know that you don't have the CSV import enabled, you won't have that tab. So it adds things to the dashboard as well. So we'll give it a title, demo test, and then there's a slug. The slug is not as squishy as it sounds. It is what is going to hang off the end of your URL. So demo test.
So make it usable. This is what people are going to remember when they want
Right.
to get back to this exhibit. You don't want it to say something like exhibit 0001. You
Right.
might want it to have the word
Give it, yeah, give it a semantic rich title. And this is the closest thing that OMEKA gets to pretty URLs, because usually the items are just numbered. So, it's item 42. And it would be nemla.omeka.net/items/42. In this case, though, it'll be nemla.omeka.net/exhibits/demo test. So you can create one OMEKA instance, have multiple exhibits, but really if you know that, someone loves dulcimers and is allergic to xylophones, you can just send them the link to the dulcimer exhibit, and they may not even ever have to know that you've actually contaminated their dulcimers with xylophones. Although it's the web, so they can probably figure it out. Exhibit credits, exhibit description. Are there specific exhibits within your tag? There's reverse that. Are there specific tags that will be used within your exhibit that are not going to be used on the rest of the site? Is this exhibit featured? Is it public? And what theme is it going to be? And this is really nice because actually your exhibits can have their own themes. They don't have to have the same theme as the main site. So you can decide to go the full branding and have everything look the same, or you can decide that, this is one on Afro-Caribbean music, so we're going to use the rhythms theme because that just seems a little more relevant than Ice Blue, and go that way. Exhibit sections and pages. There are no sections, so we better have one. So this is where you start to want to, those of you who've done physical exhibits, and I'm sure we've all been to exhibits, this is where you start to think about the website as a room, right? Or for sections, maybe the section is the room, right? So if you have a multi-room exhibit, right, you want to group, first you're going to group it by what goes in what room, right? So this is going to be the demo room, and it gets its own slug, gets a description, and then we add a page. Pages, I would suggest you think of as cases. Okay, so you have your section, which is your room, and then within your room, you will have the cases or the wall hangings, whatever, and that's what your pages are. And you can choose these various layouts. So this is going to be first demo, and they all get slugs. So actually, unlike the items that just have item/number, an exhibit has pretty URLs that you set the whole way through, which is nice. And you can change them, actually. These aren't set permanently forever. You can go back, and if you decide, oh, no, wait, that really should have been called something else because everything went there, undo that. Then you can pick a layout, and these are your options. And how they're specifically displayed will depend on your theme, but here's the really nice part. And we're going to save our changes. And now we have this page. So, all of these blocks are where items are going to go, and they're relative sizes. And then you attach the item there. So you can have a grid with 9 items. You can have one big item, you can have 8 small items, and some text. Add your big item, write your text, attach your items, attach your items, attach your items, save. And you can also save and add another page, and the whole process starts over again, right? So exhibits can have just like physical exhibits, can have one section, one room, or many sections, many rooms. You could just make a 1-case exhibit, right? Or a 2-case exhibit, in which case you would have one section with 2 pages. And that's it. And you can also see that you can have ones that are more text heavy, more image heavy. Here's one that's just all images. But you get to pick. And what you do is you take the exhibits, you take the items that you've already uploaded, and you pull them in. One thing, because OMEKA dynamically creates thumbnails, it's worth double checking as you go along. I got bitten by this at one point. I was being very, ontologically consistent, and my items had multiple files that were all associated with the same book. And I was starting to run into trouble because when I would say, I want this item to be here, it wouldn't always pick the image that I wanted. It would usually take the first image. So if, for example, I was really interested in this beautiful wood carving in the middle of the book, but I also had the front cover, the flap, and then the image, it might give me the front cover, because that was the first image. It didn't seem completely consistent, but just double check. So when you create a bunch of items, just go through and check and see how they'll show up in different layouts, because you might want to reorder your images, or it might crop things a little oddly, because it's really just going by geometry. It's not using vector analysis to say like, oh, the really pretty thing is actually slightly off center, so I should crop off center. It's not that smart. But it'll still, I mean, it looked, I'm a photographer, so I get really antsy about stuff like this. Like, my image is improperly cropped, I can't. I had a mental block for a while, but I worked through it. And, but just that's a gotcha for OMEKA. So, you know, I don't have tons and tons of things in here, so there's not really much we can do. Save changes. You can also cancel. Right. Oh, and it will helpfully, if you haven't provided metadata, it won't let you go any further. Everything must have at least a title and some description, otherwise it's not happy. Because it is right and proper. Needs a layout, needs a title. Save changes. Okay, now. So that is kind of most of OMEKA. That's pretty much what you can do. So now we can open the floor to questions. People who have used OMEKA, or open the floor to Ellen.
No, I'm just going to type something. You go
Okay.
ahead and take questions.
Okay, so let's start. If people have questions, or people who have used OMEKA or built online exhibits in either from scratch or in other formats, have any particular tips or tools, or yeah?
I have a question. Where can we see what other people have done? Through OMEKA, can you see?
Yes. So in both, the very beginning, I kind of went through it quickly, but on both omeka.org and omeka.net, there is a URL up at the very top, a link that'll say showcase. And that's where they've curated a list of some of the things that they think show off the site the best. And they tend to rotate, so that's a good place to get started.
I'm on .NET. I just clicked on Showcase.
Yeah, and here we go. So you can see that for .NET. You can see more for .org, but you should also be aware that if it really doesn't look like OMEKA, then someone's paid a lot of money.
But you see though, some of these we can recognize. This guy's using Caribbean.
Yeah.
These ones seem to be using either one of the minimal ones. Every theme has that little customized button on it, which lets you upload the banner and things like that. And one thing we didn't mention is that if you have that, if you put in the simple pages plugin, you can just make a flat page, you know, the events or links or something where you just go and go type, put in a lot of text and stick a link on the front page, menu item on the front page that says go there.
Videographer.
Would you use this with WordPress or with like Facebook or with a blog or, you know?
Well, so you can create, you could create a web, a community of websites, one of which was WordPress, or WordPress.com and OMEKA, and you could link between them. They won't integrate with each other, but if you thought through your information architecture, you could certainly have, a blog, and then you could link out to an OMEKA item. There is also, this is a really fun site, actually, the Digital Amherst one.
And it uses exhibits extensively, which is why I'm clicking.
So you can do it with links just the way you would have other things. There is also another plugin which we didn't enable but comes automatically with omeka.net, is a social bookmarking one. So you can click that and it will give you more options for social networking sites than even I knew existed. And actually one's for, I think for multiple language groups. because I think there were certainly some that seemed to be German and a couple that looked Italian, or maybe they just got really fancy in their naming. But you can have it, so for on any of your items, you could give people little links automatically so they could tweet this item, or tweet this exhibit, or do that, and it would generate a tweet that has some information in the link.
I guess I wondered, is it like, why do you use this instead of WordPress? Or
Okay.
that
Okay.
you know,
Sorry,
too?
I answered a different question.
No, it's okay. No, it's sort of the
Okay,
same.
so
but-
basically, what people typically say is there is a spectrum of platforms in which one can make exhibits, and it basically goes WordPress, OMEKA, Drupal. So basically, if you want cataloging, if that matters,
Okay.
not on like some kind of cosmic level, because of course it matters. But you might not need it for this particular exhibit, right? Because it may already be cataloged somewhere else. But if you want cataloging, if you want to be able to reuse the same thing in multiple exhibits, so the nice things about it is you put in that one item, and then you can move it. You can make it in as many exhibits as you want. It only belongs to one collection, but you can make it, you can use it in 5 different exhibits if it's the coolest thing you've got. So in WordPress, you'd have to keep moving that page around. And then Drupal is, hypothetically, you can do almost anything, but you've got to get a sysadmin and someone who knows how to use Drupal. So OMEKA is sort of somewhere in between, but it provides cataloging, it provides reusability of items, and so that would be what you would think about it. But if you're basically doing something that's essentially text, like if it's really just a couple images and a bunch of essays, use WordPress. Yeah, seriously. Only if you have a lot of reusable
I mean,
content.
this really is a bit of a content management system where the content consists of the kinds of objects that you would put in a museum or at least the representations of those objects. And it doesn't have a blog feature, really. So if you want to do a lot of updating and have a lot of social stuff, you don't use this. But if you want to have something where people who don't want to do a lot of that are able to add pieces of a collection and shape them into exhibits, then you use this. And it's limited. I mean, it has a lot of limitations that if you're used to WordPress are very irking because you can't do things that you would normally do, and you can't change the layout terribly. But it's certainly the kind of thing that lets you get up and running very quickly without tons of skill. And it was developed for as Jean said at the very beginning, it was developed for historic houses, small museums, places that don't hire a tech person and managers and curators to put up the exhibits. So that's kind of the audience for it. So full OMEKA has certain plugins which aren't as well developed as one might wish, but which in theory can connect into institutional repositories. So
Don't count on it.
but we're not testing because we have, not only do we have an institutional repository, but we have people who know how to prod things with sticks, and we aren't there yet with this thing. I mean, it has a Fedora plugin, but it doesn't seem to be doing what we want, and the version numbers are different, and who knows what. So, but they are interested in that. They know that's the direction people are going in. So again, those forums are really good places to put desiderata as well as questions.
And another thing I would just add is that because this is a project that is under ongoing development and it also has a large community base, it keeps getting better. So it's worth checking in every year or so, even if you've got a current OMEKA, like go read the documentation again, because it will change, but it also improves. I mean, we were just looking at it, yesterday as we were prepping this talk, and we were like, wait, since when was the CSV importer part of omeka.net? That used to be something you could only use for omeka.org, and now they've moved it over. So it's ongoing and it's getting better. So for all of its limitations, I think it's a community that if the current product serves a need that you have, it's a community that's worth engaging with. Yes?
I was just going to ask, are some of the really larger groups that are using it giving information back, like Europeana, thinking of, is any of their work coming back into it?
Yeah, so it's starting to. So the other, so it's the three biggest institutional names for our Center for History and New Media at George Mason, the Scholars Lab at the University of Virginia, which has built a series of plugins that allow you to create interactive maps and timelines and image annotation on top of OMEKA. And then the Digital Public Library of America uses OMEKA to create its exhibits. And that's, I think, where we're going to see a big growth in developing new platforms. This is not surprising, since Dan Cohen was the head of the Center for History and New Media and is now the head of the DPLA. But it means that there's going to be a lot more more gerbils in the cage to go and add more stuff. So it's not only is it under development at Center for History and New Media and at Scholars Lab at Virginia, it's also starting to get used by some major online digital collections. Which doesn't mean it's right for you, but yeah.
In terms of long-term preservation.
Oh, God.
Back up the original files and keep the breadcrumbs and
That
what
is,
if.
right, no, that is, no.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's unimportant, but OMEKA doesn't do that.
No, so what is
So
the
it's, you have to do,
responsibility of the-
it's, so you're gonna have to do it.
Right.
So you have to keep copies of all your files. OMEKA runs, like WordPress, on a LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. So there is a MySQL database hanging out underneath this thing. And particularly if you have .org, you can, regularly back up that database. And there are also some additional files. There's some great documentation on transferring OMEKA. So if you have to move OMEKA from one server to another, what you need to do, all the files you need to get. That's also a great blueprint for how to back this thing up and what you need to back up in order to recreate it. But yeah, this is not a preservation system. This is an access system.
So you should actually have hard copy printouts of some things as well. No?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
Well, you could.
you could, but it's then you just have to end
I'm
up
just
repeating
thinking
everything.
Y2K, what we went through, so we don't have
No,
to.
I think one way to think about this is that most people that probably in this room have these things as part of a repository.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your backup.
Yeah.
Now your
Yeah.
exhibits, and your exhibit text,
Right.
I don't know, I've never gotten a sense of how different people view exhibits. An awful lot of exhibits are online exhibits are ephemeral.
Mhm.
So it's kind of up to you. Is it ephemeral? Isn't it? Do you
Yeah.
have a scholar's essay? Well, maybe that's already in the repository as a scholar's
Right.
essay. So the interface of the OMEKA presentation is ephemeral.
Mhm.
So again, it's a decision that you make normally.
Right.
But no, it is not a preservation
No.
system. And the people who run it in small historic houses and probably are trying to do some, maybe they're running .org and have backup.
Right. Yeah. So if you are representing, I don't know what the demographics are, but if you are representing a small house, if you're thinking about using this as your backup system, then look at the documentation on moving an OMEKA instance, and that'll give you a good idea of everything you need to do to keep this thing
You can dump everything.
running. You can always dump it out.
There was one,
There were,
2, 3, 4.
one more question.
Oh, one. It's been up for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
On omeka.net, is there any way to tweak the terminology, collections, items, exhibits?
Yes. So when I showed it to you, actually before I showed you items and exhibits by accident, but if you go into the general settings, you notice there was a thing where you could add you could customize your navigation. So you could decide to call your exhibits websites, and you could decide to call your collections groups, and that's where you would change that.
Okay.
And there's documentation on how to do it. It would be the documentation will probably be called something like customizing your navigation. But you can do that.
It has excellent documentation.
Yeah.
Really, everything here sort of shows you what you can do, but you can go back and say, oh yeah, they mentioned this. It has really good doc, and I would just
Yeah.
play with it and try every option. There aren't that many.
Thank you so much for this information.